There's a moment in life when the chasing doesn't just feel tiring, it feels dangerous. Not dangerous like a car crash. Dangerous like something inside you quietly breaking while the world applauds you for doing great. It can happen in the middle of a normal day under bright lights, in a crowded city, with a calendar full of meetings and a phone buzzing with messages. Nothing looks wrong. And yet, out of nowhere, the mind whispers a terrifying sentence. If I get everything I want, why do I still feel empty? That question is the cliff. Because once it appears, you can't unhear it. It follows you into the car, into the shower, into bed at 2 a.m. when the room is silent and your own thoughts feel louder than any noise outside. And then the strangest thing happens. The very goals you used to chase, love, success, attention, validation, start to feel like shadows. The harder you reach, the less you can hold. The more you push, the more life pushes back. Almost as if the universe is trying to teach you a brutal truth: what you're chasing is not the problem. The energy you're chasing with is. Because when you chase, you're silently declaring, I don't have enough. I'm not enough. This moment isn't enough. And that declaration becomes a spell. But what if the most shocking twist is this? The life you're begging for might already be trying to find you. And the only reason it hasn't arrived is because you've been running too fast to recognize it. Stay with this story until the end, because the ending isn't what you expect. It's not about getting more. It's about the one inner shift that makes life stop feeling like a fight and start feeling like a home. And before we go deeper, if you want more wisdom like this, that you can actually use in everyday life, please support the channel by subscribing to Buddhism in every moment. Your subscription helps us keep creating powerful videos that bring peace, clarity, and strength one moment at a time. Desire is not the villain we were taught to fear. In Buddhist wisdom, desire is simply energy movement, longing, the impulse to reach toward life. Without it, nothing would grow, no dream would be born, no path would be walked. And yet, quietly, almost invisibly, desire can turn into something else. Attachment. Attachment is not desire's louder version. It's not wanting too much. Attachment is wanting with fear. It's desire fused with the belief that our happiness depends on a specific outcome, arriving in a specific way, at a specific time. This is where the trap begins, and why so many people fall into it without ever realizing it. The subtle shift that changes everything. At first, desire feels innocent. You want a better life. You want meaningful work. You want love that feels safe and real. You want peace instead of constant pressure. Nothing wrong with that. But somewhere along the way, the mind adds a quiet condition: I will be okay when this happens. That single word "when" is the doorway to suffering. Because now, the present moment is no longer enough. Now, happiness has been postponed. Now, life becomes a waiting room. And the longer you wait, the more restless you become. This is how attachment disguises itself as motivation. From the outside, it looks like ambition, discipline, drive. From the inside, it feels like tension you can't fully relax. A constant background noise in the mind saying, not yet, still not enough, keep going. Why attachment feels so normal in modern life? In today's world, attachment is rewarded. We're taught to define ourselves by what we achieve, what we own, how we're perceived. We're praised for always reaching higher, faster, further. Slowing down feels irresponsible. Letting go feels like falling behind. So attachment becomes invisible because everyone around us is doing the same thing. We attach to careers as identities, productivity as worth, busyness as importance, recognition as proof of value. And then we wonder why rest feels uncomfortable, why silence feels awkward, why success doesn't bring the relief we expected. Buddhism doesn't say this lifestyle is wrong. It simply says it comes with a cost. The cost is inner peace, the attachment to becoming someone. One of the deepest attachments is not to things but to versions of ourselves, who we thought we would be by now, who we believe we should be, who we're afraid of not becoming. This attachment is especially painful because it follows us everywhere. You can leave a job. You can move to a new city. You can change your routine. But you can't outrun an identity you're clinging to. The mind keeps measuring, am I ahead or behind? Am I winning or failing? Am I enough yet? And because the standard keeps moving, the answer is almost always no. Buddhist wisdom offers a quiet but radical insight here. You do not need to become someone else to deserve peace. Peace doesn't arrive after transformation. Transformation happens when peace is allowed first. How attachment creates fear before anything is lost. Here's the cruel irony of attachment: you suffer before anything goes wrong. The fear of losing what you have. The fear of not getting what you want. The fear of time running out. This fear drains joy from moments that could have been lived fully. You might be physically present, but mentally negotiating the future. You might be smiling but inwardly bracing for what could disappear. Attachment doesn't wait for loss to hurt you. It hurts you in advance. Buddhism teaches that this is unnecessary suffering, pain created by the mind, not by reality. Reality simply unfolds. The mind tightens around it. Healthy desire versus unconscious attachment. This is where many people misunderstand Buddhist teaching. Letting go of attachment does not mean letting go of dreams. It means changing how you hold them. Healthy desire says, I will give my best effort, with integrity and presence. Attachment says, I need this to happen, or I won't be okay. One comes from wholeness. The other comes from fear. When desire is free of attachment, effort feels clean, not desperate. Action feels focused, not frantic. Failure feels informative, not crushing. You still care, but you don't cling. And paradoxically, this makes you more effective, not less. The mind's favorite lie, just one more. Attachment keeps the mind chasing the next milestone. Just one more promotion. Just one more relationship upgrade. Just one more level of security. And every time you reach it, there's a brief high followed by a familiar emptiness. The mind then whispers, okay, but now what? This isn't because you chose the wrong goal. It's because fulfillment was never inside the goal to begin with. Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to abandon ambition. It asks you to stop asking ambition to do a job it was never meant to do. No external achievement can permanently quiet an inner sense of lack. That quieting happens when attachment dissolves. What life feels like without attachment. Imagine still wanting growth, but without panic. Still moving forward, but without self-punishment. Still dreaming, but without postponing happiness. This is not a fantasy. It's a different relationship with desire. When attachment loosens, the nervous system relaxes. Decisions become clearer. Joy becomes less conditional. You stop living as if life is a test you're about to fail. You start living as if life is something you're participating in, not proving yourself to. A gentle practice to notice attachment. Here's a simple reflection rooted in Buddhist awareness. When you feel anxious or impatient, pause and ask, what am I afraid won't happen? What am I afraid of losing? Then ask, who would I be if I didn't need this to define my worth? You don't need to force an answer. Just noticing the attachment begins to soften it. Awareness is not passive. It's the beginning of freedom. The quiet truth beneath desire. Buddhist wisdom points to a truth that feels almost too simple. You don't suffer because you want things. You suffer because you believe you can't be at peace without them, and that belief, once seen clearly, begins to loosen its grip. As attachment fades, something unexpected appears. Space, breath, relief. Not because life finally gave you what you wanted, but because you stopped demanding that life be something other than what it is. And in that space, fulfillment begins not as a destination, but as a way of being. From the moment we are young, we are taught a powerful message: if you work hard enough, plan carefully enough, and push consistently enough, you can control your life. This belief is praised. It sounds responsible. It sounds empowering. And for a while, it even seems true. You organize. You strategize. You set goals. You try to stay one step ahead. And when things go according to plan, control feels like proof that life is manageable. But then quietly or suddenly life disrupts the illusion. Something doesn't move when it's supposed to. Something ends without permission. Something arrives before you're ready. Something you did everything right for still falls apart. And in that moment, the mind panics, not because the event itself is unbearable, but because the belief beneath it collapses. I thought I had this under control. Why control feels necessary? The need for control doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from fear. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of loss. Fear of chaos. The mind seeks control because it believes control equals safety. If we can predict outcomes, manage timing, and shape circumstances, then nothing can surprise us too deeply. But Buddhism gently reveals a hard truth. Control does not eliminate uncertainty. It only delays our confrontation with it. Life has always been uncertain. Control simply keeps us busy pretending otherwise. The cultural myth of mastery. In modern American culture, control is woven into success stories. We celebrate the idea of taking charge, making it happen, dominating the odds. There is value in discipline and responsibility, but hidden inside this narrative is a dangerous assumption that life is a machine. And if you pull the right levers, it will behave. Buddhist wisdom sees life differently. Life is not mechanical. It is relational. Everything arises from causes and conditions, many of which are outside personal will. You influence life. You do not command it. Confusing these two is the source of enormous suffering. When control turns into tension. At first, control looks like preparation. But over time, it hardens into tension. You replay conversations in your head. You try to predict reactions. You rehearse futures that haven't happened. The body tightens. The mind races. And even during good moments, part of you is already bracing for what could go wrong. This is not peace. This is vigilance. Buddhism teaches that a mind obsessed with control is never truly at rest because it's always scanning for threats to its plans. Karma, not fate, but flow. One of the most misunderstood Buddhist teachings is karma. Karma is not punishment. It is not destiny carved in stone. Karma simply means that life unfolds through interconnected causes and conditions. Your actions matter. Your intentions matter. But they are never the only factors. When we try to force outcomes, we ignore the complexity of reality. We act as if our will alone should override timing, context, and the lives of others. This is why forcing often creates resistance. Life pushes back, not out of cruelty, but because reality cannot be bullied. The difference between responsibility and control. Buddhist wisdom draws a powerful distinction. You are responsible for your actions. You are not responsible for the results. Responsibility means acting with integrity, showing up fully, making wise choices. Control means demanding certainty, fixating on outcomes, resisting anything unexpected. When responsibility replaces control, something softens inside. You do your part, and then you let life do its part. This shift doesn't make you weaker, it makes you steadier. Why surrender feels so frightening? The word surrender often triggers resistance. It sounds like giving up, like losing power, like accepting defeat. But Buddhist surrender is not collapse, it is clarity. Surrender means acknowledging what is already true. You don't see the whole picture. You can't control timing. You don't need to fight reality to live well. The fear around surrender comes from the ego, the part of the mind that believes its worth depends on control. When control loosens, the ego feels exposed. But beneath that fear is relief, the freedom of cooperation with life. There is a different way to move through the world, one that feels less like struggle and more like alignment. Instead of asking, "How do I make this happen?" you begin asking, "How do I respond wisely to what's here?" This subtle shift changes everything. You stop exhausting yourself trying to predict life. You start listening to it. Opportunities become clearer. Decisions feel more grounded. Mistakes become information, not shame. You are no longer fighting the current, you are learning how to swim with it. When control softens, presence deepens. One of the quiet gifts of releasing control is presence. When you're not constantly managing outcomes, you actually arrive in the moment. You notice how your body feels, what your intuition is saying, what's genuinely needed now. Presence doesn't eliminate difficulty, but it eliminates unnecessary suffering. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of panic. A simple reflection on control. When anxiety rises, try this gentle inquiry: what am I trying to control right now? What am I afraid will happen if I don't? Then ask, what part of this can I act on, and what part must I allow? You don't need immediate answers. The power is in the honesty, the deeper truth about control. Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to abandon effort. It asks you to abandon the fantasy that effort guarantees certainty. Life is not meant to be conquered. It is meant to be engaged with humility. When you release the need to control, your mind becomes lighter. Your actions become clearer. Your heart becomes more open. And something unexpected happens. Life stops feeling like an opponent. It starts feeling like a conversation, one you no longer have to dominate to be heard. In a world that never stops talking, stillness feels almost suspicious. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Pauses feel unproductive. Moments without stimulation are quickly filled scrolling, noise, movement, distraction. And yet, Buddhism has always pointed to a truth that feels almost rebellious in modern life. Stillness is not the absence of progress. It is the foundation of clarity. We don't lose our way because we're lazy. We lose our way because we're constantly moving without listening. Why we avoid stillness? Stillness strips away distractions, and distractions are often what protect us from ourselves. When everything goes quiet, uncomfortable questions surface. Am I actually happy? Why do I feel restless even when nothing is wrong? What am I avoiding by staying busy? The mind prefers motion because motion feels like control. Stillness, on the other hand, asks us to sit with uncertainty. So we label stillness as weakness, as wasted time, as something we'll do later when life slows down. But life rarely slows down on its own. Stillness is not doing nothing. One of the greatest misunderstandings is believing that stillness means inaction. Buddhist stillness is not collapse. It is alert presence. Like a lake with no ripples, stillness allows reflection. When the water is calm, the sky becomes visible. When the mind is calm, truth becomes accessible. In stillness, you see what you were too busy to notice. You hear what urgency drowned out. You feel what distraction kept hidden. This is why wisdom doesn't shout. It waits. The nervous system needs quiet to heal. Modern life keeps the nervous system in a constant state of alert. Deadlines, notifications, expectations, comparisons. Even when nothing is happening, the body behaves as if something might happen. Buddhist practice understood this long before neuroscience gave it language. Stillness tells the body you are safe right now. And when the body feels safe, the mind loosens its grip. Breath deepens. Muscles soften. Thoughts slow. This isn't spiritual fantasy, it's physiological relief. Where stillness lives in real life. Stillness is not reserved for monasteries or mountaintops. It appears in ordinary places, early mornings before the world wakes up. Long walks without headphones. Sitting near water without needing answers. The quiet pause before responding instead of reacting. Stillness doesn't require isolation. It requires attention. The moment you stop trying to fix, impress, or hurry, stillness arrives. Why answers appear when you stop searching. There's a strange paradox Buddhism teaches again and again: the harder you chase answers, the more elusive they become. The moment you stop forcing clarity, it emerges. This is because insight doesn't come from mental pressure. It comes from spacious awareness. When the mind relaxes, patterns become obvious. Intuition strengthens. Decisions feel simpler. You don't need to overthink, you begin to see. Stillness doesn't give you new information. It removes the noise blocking what you already know. The fear beneath noise. Noise isn't just sound. It's mental commentary, constant thinking, planning, analyzing, replaying. Buddhism observes that much of this noise is rooted in fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, fear of facing emotions we haven't processed. Stillness invites these fears into the open, not to punish us, but to release their hold. What we resist stays loud. What we allow begins to soften. Stillness as inner strength. In a culture that celebrates speed, stillness becomes a quiet rebellion. It takes strength to pause. It takes courage to be silent. It takes wisdom to not react immediately. Stillness allows you to choose responses instead of repeating habits. You stop living on autopilot. You stop being dragged by every thought. And gradually, something shifts. Life stops feeling like a chase and starts feeling like a conversation. A simple practice of stillness. Try this without expectation once a day. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. No phone, no agenda, no fixing. Just notice the breath, the body, the thoughts passing by. Don't argue with them. Don't follow them. Just watch. This is not about becoming calm. It's about becoming aware. Calm arrives naturally when awareness is allowed. What changes when stillness becomes familiar? As stillness becomes part of life, reactivity decreases. Clarity increases. Emotional resilience grows. You stop confusing urgency with importance. You begin to trust silence. And slowly, the mind learns something revolutionary. You don't have to rush to be whole. You don't have to chase to arrive. Stillness reveals that much of what you were searching for was already waiting beneath the noise. For many people, the idea of letting go feels like standing at the edge of something frightening. If you let go, will you lose your drive? Will your dreams fade? Will life become smaller? These fears are understandable. In a world that equates effort with worth, letting go sounds like giving up. But Buddhist wisdom offers a very different perspective. Letting go is not about losing life. It's about losing what no longer lets life flow. Why we hold on so tightly? We don't cling because we are weak. We cling because we are afraid. Afraid of uncertainty. Afraid of emptiness. Afraid that without holding on, everything will fall apart. So we hold on to old expectations, familiar pain, identities that once protected us, stories about how life should unfold. Even when these things hurt us, they feel safer than the unknown. Buddhism sees this clearly. Suffering often comes not from pain itself, but from our refusal to release what has already changed. Letting go is not erasing the past. One of the biggest misunderstandings about letting go is believing it requires forgetting, denying, or minimizing what mattered. Letting go does not erase experiences. It releases the grip they have on the present. You can honor effort without clinging to outcomes. You can appreciate chapters of life without trying to relive them. You can acknowledge loss without allowing it to define you. Buddhist non-attachment is not cold detachment, it is respectful release. The weight of carrying what no longer fits. Over time, life evolves. We evolve. But the mind often insists on carrying old versions of ourselves into new realities. This creates friction. What once felt right begins to feel heavy. What once motivated begins to drain. What once inspired begins to restrict. Letting go is not failure. It's recognition. Recognition that growth sometimes requires subtraction, not addition. Why letting go feels like grief? Letting go often hurts not because it's wrong, but because it involves mourning. We grieve lost expectations, unlived futures, identities we outgrew. This grief is rarely acknowledged in everyday life, but Buddhism honors it. Grief is not a sign you're going backward. It's a sign you're honest. When you allow grief instead of resisting it, something gentle happens. The heart softens. The body relaxes. The fight ends. Action without attachment. Letting go does not mean stopping action. It means changing your relationship with results. You still show up. You still care. You still act with intention, but you no longer demand that effort guarantees a specific outcome. This shift brings unexpected freedom. You act more courageously. You recover faster from setbacks. You stay open instead of bitter. Buddhist wisdom teaches that effort guided by presence is far more powerful than effort driven by fear. Letting go of control versus letting go of responsibility. There is an important distinction here. You don't let go of responsibility. You let go of obsession. Responsibility is grounded. Obsession is exhausting. When obsession fades, clarity returns. You stop forcing what isn't ready. You stop chasing what's running away. You stop punishing yourself for timing you don't control. The space that appears after letting go. When something is released, space opens. At first, that space can feel uncomfortable, like silence after noise. But space is where life moves. New perspectives enter. Unexpected opportunities appear. Energy returns. Letting go creates room not for chaos, but for alignment. A gentle practice for letting go. When you notice tension, ask quietly, what am I gripping right now? Is holding on helping or hurting? Then imagine loosening your grip, not all at once, but slightly. You don't need to drop everything. You just need to stop squeezing. Even a small release changes everything. The deeper truth about letting go. Buddhist wisdom reminds us, you don't lose yourself by letting go. You uncover yourself. What remains after release is not emptiness, it is essence. When you stop clinging to what you thought you needed to be, something more honest takes its place. Not louder, not shinier, but lighter, truer. And in that lightness, life becomes easier to carry, not because it weighs less, but because you no longer fight its movement. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes from constantly being measured. Measured by performance. Measured by productivity. Measured by how others respond to you. Many people don't realize how deeply this exhaustion runs, because it hides behind ambition, politeness, and success. On the surface, life looks fine. But underneath, there's a subtle pressure always asking, am I enough yet? Buddhist wisdom recognizes this pressure as one of the most painful forms of suffering. Not because we lack worth, but because we keep trying to prove it. How approval becomes a habit. The desire for approval doesn't begin as weakness. It begins as connection. We learn early that being accepted feels safe. Being praised feels reassuring. Being liked feels like belonging. Over time, the mind quietly learns a dangerous lesson: my value depends on how I'm received. So we adjust. We perform. We edit ourselves. We say yes when we mean no. We stay quiet when something matters. We work harder, not always to grow but to be seen. Eventually, approval stops feeling optional. It feels necessary. And that's when self-worth quietly leaves our own hands. The trap of comparison. Comparison feels logical, almost unavoidable. We look around to understand where we stand. But comparison rarely brings clarity, it brings judgment. There will always be someone ahead. There will always be someone behind. There will always be someone doing life differently. When self-worth depends on comparison, peace becomes impossible because the measuring never ends. Buddhism teaches that comparison is not a reflection of truth. It's a reflection of insecurity. The moment you compare, you've stepped out of your own life and into someone else's story. Why external validation never satisfies. Even when approval comes, it rarely lasts. Praise fades. Attention shifts. Standards change. And the mind immediately asks for more. This is not because people are ungrateful. It's because validation is temporary by nature. Buddhist wisdom points out a simple truth: anything that comes from outside cannot stabilize what's unsettled inside. No amount of recognition can replace inner acceptance. Intrinsic worth, a radical idea. One of the most transformative Buddhist insights is this: your worth is not earned. It is inherent. You don't become valuable by achieving more. You don't lose value by resting. You don't need permission to matter. This idea feels radical because it contradicts much of modern conditioning. But it also feels deeply relieving because something inside recognizes it as true. When worth is intrinsic, you act from integrity, not desperation. You listen without shrinking. You speak without needing to impress. Confidence becomes quiet. Boundaries become natural. Emotional independence. Buddhism doesn't teach isolation. It teaches emotional independence. Emotional independence means you welcome appreciation, but don't depend on it. You consider feedback, but aren't defined by it. You belong to yourself first. This doesn't make relationships colder, it makes them healthier. When you're not chasing approval, you show up more honestly. You stop overgiving. You stop resenting what others never promised. Love becomes a choice, not a transaction. The freedom of no longer performing. There is immense relief in no longer trying to be enough for everyone. You stop curating your personality. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop fearing disagreement. Buddhist wisdom reminds us, you are not here to be universally approved. You are here to live truthfully. When performance drops, presence rises. And presence is far more attractive than perfection. A simple reflection on worth. When self-doubt appears, pause and ask, if no one were watching, if no one were judging, who would I allow myself to be right now? Sit with that question gently. Often, the answer feels calmer, softer, more real. That version of you doesn't need to prove anything. What changes when self-worth comes from within? When self-worth is no longer outsourced, comparison loses its grip. Approval becomes pleasant, not necessary. Rejection becomes information, not identity. You stop living defensively. You begin to live deliberately. Buddhist wisdom doesn't promise a life without criticism. It promises a life where criticism no longer defines you. And in that freedom, something powerful happens. You stop asking the world to tell you who you are. And you finally start listening to yourself. For many people, the idea of trusting life feels risky. If you trust too much, won't you fall behind? If you stop pushing, won't everything slow down? If you release control, won't life take advantage of you? These questions come from a culture that confuses trust with laziness and patience with weakness. Buddhism offers a very different understanding, one that is both grounded and practical. Trust is not inaction. Trust is intelligent patience. Why trust feels so difficult? Trusting life requires something the ego resists: uncertainty. The mind wants guarantees. It wants proof before it relaxes. It wants reassurance that effort will be rewarded exactly as expected. But life rarely offers guarantees. So instead of trusting, we overwork. Instead of listening, we force. Instead of allowing, we hurry. Buddhist wisdom doesn't blame us for this. It simply points out the cost. When trust disappears, anxiety takes its place. The difference between trust and passivity. Passivity avoids responsibility. Trust accepts reality. This distinction matters. Trusting life does not mean waiting for things to magically improve. It means engaging fully without panic. You still act. You still prepare. You still make thoughtful choices. But you stop trying to control timing and outcomes. Buddhism teaches that wise effort is calm, not frantic. Timing as a form of wisdom. One of the most painful sources of frustration is timing. Why now? Why not yet? Why did that opportunity pass? The mind interprets delay as failure. Buddhism interprets delay as information. Some doors don't open because conditions aren't ready. Some paths close because they no longer align. Some waiting periods are preparing you in ways you can't yet see. Trust grows when you understand that timing is not random, it's relational. Missed opportunities and hidden protection. Looking back, many people realize something quietly profound. Some things they desperately wanted would have cost them more than they knew. Trusting life means accepting that not everything that looks like loss is loss. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's redirection. Sometimes it's life saying, not this, something better aligned. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to release the story that every closed door is a mistake. Listening instead of forcing. When trust replaces force, attention sharpens. You start noticing subtle signals, emotional resistance, moments of ease. Life communicates through feeling, not just logic. Forcing ignores these signals. Trust listens, and listening allows you to move with life instead of against it. Responsibility without anxiety. Trusting life doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. It means carrying it without fear. You do what's yours to do, show up honestly, act with integrity, stay present, and then you allow space for outcomes you can't predict. This balance brings peace not because everything works out, but because you stop fighting what hasn't happened yet. A simple practice of trust. When impatience arises, ask, what is within my control right now? What needs to be allowed instead of pushed? Then breathe. This question grounds effort while releasing obsession. What life feels like when trust grows. As trust deepens, decisions feel clearer. Waiting feels lighter. Fear loses urgency. You stop rushing life. And life, in return, feels less resistant. Buddhist wisdom doesn't promise that trusting life removes challenges. It promises something more valuable. You won't face them alone with panic as your guide. Trust turns struggle into movement, uncertainty into openness. And slowly, life begins to feel less like something you must conquer, and more like something you are learning to walk with. Most people don't realize how rarely they are actually here. The body may be sitting still. The eyes may be open. But the mind is somewhere else, replaying what already happened or rehearsing what might come next. This constant mental movement feels normal, responsible even. Yet Buddhism points to a quiet truth, hidden in plain sight: fulfillment does not exist in the past or the future. It only exists in presence. And presence is not something we reach later. It's something we return to now. Why the mind refuses to stay here? The mind is trained to escape the present moment. The past offers familiarity even if it's painful. The future offers hope even if it's imaginary. The present moment, however, offers no promises, only reality. So the mind avoids it. It worries, plans, regrets, analyzes anything to avoid sitting fully inside what is. Buddhist wisdom does not condemn this habit. It simply reveals its consequence. When you are never present, life keeps happening without you. Psychological time and invisible suffering. Buddhism describes suffering not just as pain, but as psychological time, the mind's obsession with what was and what might be. You suffer when you relive moments you cannot change. You anticipate futures you cannot control. You measure today against an imagined timeline. This suffering feels real, but it isn't happening now. Presence dissolves this illusion, not by fixing the past or controlling the future, but by returning awareness to where life actually unfolds. The simplicity we overlook. Presence is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It lives in simple moments, feeling breath enter and leave the body, noticing the ground beneath your feet, listening without preparing a response. These moments don't look impressive, but they are transformative. Because the nervous system relaxes when it realizes, there is nothing I need to escape right now. Why fulfillment can't be achieved. One of the most misunderstood ideas in modern life is that fulfillment is something we achieve. A milestone, a status, a future version of ourselves. Buddhist wisdom quietly corrects this belief. Fulfillment is not a destination. It is a state of awareness. You don't arrive at fulfillment, you notice it. The moment you stop postponing peace, peace becomes available. Presence in ordinary life. Presence doesn't require a different life. It requires a different relationship with the one you already have. You can be present while washing dishes, while driving familiar roads, while waiting without distraction. Presence turns routine into refuge. Nothing changes externally, but internally, something softens. You stop rushing through moments to reach something else. And suddenly, life feels fuller without adding anything. The end of inner resistance. Much of our suffering comes from resisting what is. I shouldn't feel this way. This moment should be different. I'll be okay when this passes. Presence doesn't argue with reality. It allows experience without judgment. And when resistance fades, intensity fades with it. What remains is clarity, a gentle practice of presence. Try this simple pause wherever you are. Notice one thing you can feel, one thing you can hear, one thing you can see. No interpretation, no story, just noticing. This small act brings the mind home. What changes when presence becomes familiar? When presence deepens, anxiety loses its grip. Gratitude becomes natural. Fulfillment stops feeling distant. You realize something quietly profound. You were never meant to escape life to find peace. You were meant to arrive inside it. Buddhist wisdom doesn't promise a perfect moment. It promises something more honest. This moment, when fully lived, is enough. And in that enoughness, fulfillment finally stops chasing you. Because you are already here. There is a subtle moment many people experience, though few can explain it. Life stops feeling like a constant uphill push. Decisions feel less forced. Outcomes arrive with less resistance. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because something inside has shifted. Buddhism calls this alignment. Alignment is not luck. It is not manifestation. It is not coincidence. It is what happens when inner conflict fades and your actions begin to match your values, your timing, and your truth. What alignment really means. Alignment is often misunderstood as effortlessness. In reality, alignment still requires action, but it removes unnecessary struggle. When you are aligned, you stop acting from fear. You stop proving yourself. You stop chasing validation. Your energy becomes clean, and clean energy moves efficiently. Buddhist wisdom teaches that when intention, action, and awareness move together, life responds more smoothly, not because you control it, but because you are no longer fighting it. Why resistance creates friction? Most resistance is internal. We resist what we feel, what we know, what is already happening. So we push, deny, distract, or force. Resistance drains energy. Alignment restores it. When resistance drops, clarity increases. Timing improves. Choices feel simpler. You are no longer divided against yourself. The difference between hustle and flow. Hustle relies on pressure. Flow relies on presence. Hustle says, more effort will fix this. Flow asks, is this aligned with who I am right now? Buddhist wisdom does not reject effort. It rejects blind effort. Aligned action feels grounded. Misaligned action feels heavy. Your body often knows the difference before your mind does. How life responds to alignment. When alignment deepens, life doesn't obey, you simply notice different things. Opportunities feel clearer. Conversations feel more honest. Paths appear that were previously invisible. This is not magic. It's attention without distortion. When fear, attachment, and control loosen, perception sharpens. You see what fits and what doesn't more quickly. Authenticity as alignment. Alignment is inseparable from authenticity. When you stop performing, you attract situations that match you. You repel what doesn't. This filtering is not rejection, it's clarity. Buddhist wisdom teaches that authenticity simplifies life. Less pretending means fewer wrong turns. Less effort, better results. One of the most surprising discoveries on this path is that less effort often produces better outcomes. Not because effort is bad, but because wasted effort disappears. You stop chasing what drains you. You stop fixing what isn't yours. You stop forcing what resists. And what remains is focused, meaningful action, a simple alignment check. When something feels stuck, ask, is this coming from fear or clarity? Am I pushing or responding? The answer is usually felt, not reasoned. Alignment speaks quietly but clearly. What alignment feels like over time. As alignment becomes familiar, life feels less chaotic. Self-trust grows. Regret diminishes. You stop second-guessing every choice. Not because you're always right, but because you're present. Buddhist wisdom doesn't promise a perfect path. It promises a truthful one. And when you walk truthfully, something remarkable happens. Life doesn't need to be forced. It begins to meet you halfway. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped resisting who you are. At the end of all the seeking, something quietly becomes clear. Fulfillment was never hiding behind the next achievement. Peace was never waiting in a future version of yourself. And life was never meant to be conquered, optimized, or perfected. It was meant to be lived. Buddhist wisdom does not offer a dramatic finish. It offers a gentle return. A return to what has always been here. The myth we believed about fulfillment. Many people grow up believing the same story. One day, everything will finally make sense. One day, the pressure will ease. One day, life will feel complete. So we endure the present in exchange for a promised future. But that future never fully arrives because the mind keeps moving the finish line. Buddhism doesn't call this failure. It calls it misunderstanding. Fulfillment was never meant to be postponed. What fulfillment actually is. Fulfillment is not excitement that fades. It is steadiness that remains. It is the feeling of being at home inside yourself, even when life is imperfect. Fulfillment looks quiet, waking up without dread, moving through the day without inner conflict, accepting moments as they are, without constant negotiation. This kind of fulfillment doesn't depend on conditions. It comes from alignment with reality, the return to yourself. Throughout life, many people drift far from themselves. They become who they were expected to be. They chase what they were told mattered. They silence what feels true to belong. Buddhist wisdom invites a return, not to a past identity, but to presence. When you stop abandoning yourself for approval, speed, or certainty, something stabilizes. You stop feeling lost not because you found all the answers, but because you stopped running from the moment you're in. Why simplicity feels so radical? Simplicity is often misunderstood as settling. In truth, simplicity is clarity. It's knowing what matters and letting the rest fall away. Buddhist teachings remind us, the mind complicates what the heart already understands. When you stop chasing complexity, life becomes lighter. Not because problems disappear, but because you stop adding unnecessary weight. Living without the constant fight. A fulfilling life doesn't mean life stops challenging you. It means you stop fighting yourself while facing those challenges. You still feel fear, but it no longer leads. You still experience loss, but it doesn't define you. You still make mistakes, but you don't live in regret. Peace becomes a companion, not a reward. The quiet confidence of acceptance. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the confidence to face reality without resistance. When you accept what is, energy returns. Choices clarify. Life softens. You stop arguing with the moment. And in that silence, wisdom rises. The final Buddhist insight. After all the teachings, reflections, and practices, Buddhism leaves you with a simple truth. You don't need to become someone else to live a fulfilling life. You don't need to wait for conditions to be perfect. You don't need to chase what is already trying to meet you. Fulfillment begins the moment you stop asking life to be different and start allowing yourself to be fully here. A gentle closing reflection. Take a breath. Not to achieve anything, not to fix anything, just to arrive. This moment exactly as it is enough to begin again. And perhaps the most liberating realization of all is this: you were never behind. You were never broken. You were never missing life. You were simply learning how to stop running and finally walk with it. Throughout this entire journey, one truth has quietly revealed itself again and again: we were never lacking effort, ambition, or intelligence. What we were lacking was ease. We spent years chasing security, meaning, validation, control, believing that fulfillment lived just a little further ahead. And each time we reached something we once wanted, the relief was brief, the satisfaction temporary. Not because we failed, but because fulfillment was never hiding in the future to begin with. This story was not about rejecting desire or ambition. It was about changing the way we relate to life. Buddhism doesn't ask us to withdraw from the world, it asks us to stop fighting it, to stop gripping so tightly, to stop demanding that life prove our worth before we allow ourselves to feel at peace. We learned that attachment quietly drains joy, control creates tension, and constant comparison erodes self-worth. We saw how stillness brings clarity, how presence restores fullness, and how alignment invites life to respond naturally without force. Most importantly, we discovered something deeply human and deeply freeing: fulfillment is not something you earn. It's something you allow. It appears when effort is balanced with trust, when action is guided by clarity instead of fear, when we stop postponing peace until life meets our conditions. A fulfilling life is not louder or more impressive. It's steadier. It feels like being at home inside yourself, even while life remains uncertain. The deeper lesson and how to apply it. The deepest lesson from this story is simple, but not easy: stop chasing life. Start meeting it. You apply this wisdom by acting with intention, not desperation. Releasing attachment to outcomes while staying responsible for your actions. Choosing presence over constant mental time travel. Letting go of approval as a source of worth. Trusting timing without becoming passive. In daily life, this might look like pausing before reacting, allowing silence without filling it, letting effort be enough without demanding guarantees, accepting where you are while still growing. These are not dramatic changes, but they are transformative. Your turn. Join the conversation. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which part of this journey resonated with you the most? Where do you find yourself still chasing or learning to let go? How do you define a fulfilling life in your own words? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can all learn from each other's perspectives. And if this reflection brought you clarity, calm, or insight, please subscribe to the channel Buddhism in Every Moment. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that brings wisdom, peace, and depth into everyday life. Thank you for being here and for walking this path with an open heart.